All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'm going to stand up for a moment just to say hello. Hi. I'm Dan Malthrop. I'm the Chief Executive here at the City Club of Cleveland. This is a not your standard City Club forum. Now I've got your attention, I'll sit down. This is really not your standard forum. Really, this is meant to be an informational Q&A session, an input gathering session about the Creative Workforce Fellowship. And the reason we're doing this, and the reason that you are all here, is because I think it was last month that CAC, the funder of the Creative Workforce Program, pushed the pause button on the program to give themselves time to review a not insubstantial evaluation completed by the program administrator, the Community Partnership for Arts and Culture. So we have Karen Gahl-Mills from CAC, Tom Schorgl from CPAC, also known as CPAC, not to be confused with a conservative organization of a similar acronym. And some of you will recall that there was some intense discussion on various forms of social media, and that happened right after the announcement was made that the Creative Workforce Fellowship Program would be temporarily suspended. And we were watching it, and we saw a lot of some misinformation, a lot of passion and fear and concern, and it seemed that it would be appropriate and helpful to the community if we just offered a place for the community to have a conversation, a little dialogue about what's going on with this program, what happened, what's in this report, what it means, and then also what process is going to unfold in the coming months and what the potential outcomes might be. So that's what we're doing. This is not going to be the standard sort of 30 minutes of us yakking and then 4 of you get to ask a question. We're going to do some brief stuff up here. I've got a few clarifying questions. A couple of people have submitted questions to me in advance. And then we're going to invite you all to offer your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, anything. Unlike most City Club forums, you don't have to ask just a question. And we'll have microphones come around later. But you can, if you've just got a point that you want to raise or a concern, we want to hear that. We're recording all of this. We're capturing everything. So both CPAC and CAC and anybody else who wants it will be able to listen. Okay? Sound good? All right. So we're going to start off with some brief points of view and basically about the program itself, the evaluation, and the process, and moving forward. So Tom, would you like to start? Sure. Since it was CPAC that did the evaluations?
Okay, thank you. The Community Partnership for Arts and Culture, one of our core competencies.
Oh, wait, I'm really sorry. Just a point of transparency and disclosure. The City Club of Cleveland is funded in part, has some small project funding from CAC. It's $14,600. You all should know that. Okay.
Thank you.
Go Dan.
The Community Partnership for Arts and Culture, as I think many of you know, have been involved in public policy, research, and capacity building. And so around public policy and research is how the program began. We, back in 2004, worked with the county commissioners. We did 11 public meetings around if we ever received public sector funding, what would those programs look like? Operating support, project support, and support to individual artists came out of that report, which was subsequently then adopted as a resolution by the county commissioners. Issue 18 passed, thank you. And the result of that was we could start those programs in Cuyahoga County, operating support and project support. In 2007, CAC invited us to do some research on different types of programs across the United States that are dedicated to funding artists. This was fellowships, business development programs, residencies, and public artworks. Those were basically the categories that we did the research on. We presented that research to CAC in 2008. They then came back to us and they said, we'd like for you to design a program. So, of course, we formed a task force, and we had a task force of different artists, and we also have committees at CPAC's board. We went through about 3 months of discussion and design, and we came back to CAC with what is now known as the Creative Workforce Fellowship. Now, the Creative Workforce Fellowship, some of the facts about it, There have been 133 recipients of the Creative Workforce Fellowship and the Seth Rosenberg Prize. The Seth Rosenberg Prize is a smaller amount of $2,500, where the fellowship is $20,000. And that's in honor of one of our first fellows who passed away before he was able to complete his fellowship. So there's been 133 fellowships in 5 years, and that has come to a total of $2.4 million. These fellowships have basically been research and development, although the artists can use them for projects as well as other expenses that buys them time. We have supporting programs that are associated with that, which would be the Artists Entrepreneur Institute, which the recipients could be a part of, no cost, and then the Cozy Arts Network, which is no longer in force, but at that time it was. And we did a video catalog of all of the artists, and we have that up on our website. CPAC is a research, a capacity building, and a public policy organization. And we continue to do that, and we work with our funders, our partners, CAC, when it comes to the Creative Workforce Fellowship. In about a year ago, in July of 2013, it was time for us to do the evaluation. We said halfway in 10 years, at 5 years, we would do the evaluation. We sent out an RFP. We've got about 7 or 8 different responses. We selected a group out of Chicago, primarily because of their work with individual artists and funding, public sector funding. We projected that research would be done by the end of December. It wasn't. It took us until the end of January to get the final research, but we felt that it was very thorough. It does absolutely, we think, point out the strengths of the program and recommendations that we think are very valid. Because of that, we were not able to give CAC a copy of that plan earlier than March, at which time we met with CAC in April. We discussed it, and at that point, it was going to be a review of the material with their board at their September board meeting. Based on that, it takes about 6 months to run this program from beginning to end. And we felt like we were not going to be able to do that if the program was renewed, or at least the funding for the program was renewed in 1 quarter of the year. So we are absolutely eager to provide CAC and all of you around here with any information that you'd like. The evaluation is up on our website, and thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, Tom. Karen, can you fill in any blanks, or talk about where we are from CAC's perspective?
Absolutely, and let me also start by saying thank you, Dan, for bringing folks together today for this kind of conversation that's different than what the City Club usually does, but we appreciate that. And thanks, Tom, for making time to be here, and thank you to all of you for coming. I echo Tom's comments there. We're the public funder. We want to hear from the public, not just those who get grants from us, but those who are interested citizens in the community. That's our job. So it's always good for us to come to a forum like this and hear what it is that you have to say. A couple of things. I think Tom's narratives is a fine way to describe the process. One of the things, though, that we did all talk about, Tom, for some period of time, starting, when you guys got your evaluation process started, and it was clearly very thorough and important to wait till it was done for all of us to decide what happens next. As we all had a concern that this was going to mean that there was going to be a delay in moving the program forward. And everybody at Cuyahoga Arts and Culture understands that there are people who are really disappointed that there isn't an application they can apply to in 2014 for a fellowship. And we get that, and we understand your disappointment, but we've got to do our diligence as well. And I think that's, if I can leave you with 2 points today as we think through sort of what happens next and how are we going to do things together, I want you to think about a couple of things. First, we're the public funder. We've got a responsibility, very clear responsibility, in the way we think about how dollars get invested. And being a responsible funder, means doing due diligence. So like every program we have, our operating support program, our project support program, everything we've done, the last cycle of the fellowship, before we start a next cycle of anything, we spend sometimes as much as a year, as in the case of the operating support program, sometimes 6 months assessing the program, looking ourselves internally at, does it align with our goals, and is it aligned with our mission and our vision and values? Is it still serving us the way we need it to? That's what a responsible funder does. That's what we're doing here, is we're pushing pause. I wouldn't say that, I'm trying very hard not to say the program is suspended, because suspended implies that our board has taken action that they've not taken. Okay. So let's be clear about that. The program's not suspended, but we're not ready to talk to CPAC and invite them to make a proposal to us so that then there can be a grant application moving forward, because we're doing our diligence like we do with every program that we have. So that's one thing just to know going into this. There's nothing strange or mysterious going on here. This is a funder doing what a funder does, and there are plenty of funders in the room here, and I'm sure that they can share that they probably have a similar process as they move forward. But the second thing I want you to think about as we get into these conversations about, so how do we move forward? CAC also has a financial reality that we need to deal with as well. You know how we're sourced. It's a cigarette tax, thanks to the hard work of Tom and many, many others on issue 18. And you know what's happening with cigarette smoking? People are doing less of it. And this year, for the first time in a while, we are seeing that decline that we've expected since the very beginning. I know that Tom and his colleagues and the folks from the campaign from the very beginning said, look, it isn't always going to be $19 or $20 million, but it'll still be enough money to do some good. And that it's going to decrease over time, so be prepared for that. And for the first few years of my tenure, since I started in 2008, that decline has been, 2010, excuse me, that decline has been a little slower than we thought, which has been helpful. We've been able to invest in some additional things. We've been able to fully fund the fellowship for 3 full cycles, 6 years in a row. And I think our total investment, if I look at it correctly, is about $3.4 million over the course of that time, because there's fellowships and some administration and those kind of things, right? That's not the story that we can tell today. We're off, our revenues are off from budget 5% from where we thought we would be at this point in the year, and we're off almost 7% from where we were last year. That means that we're going to have less than $16 million to work with in this year, less than that in 2015 and going forward. And if you've been reading the paper, you know that our governor is talking about a statewide cigarette tax, which will certainly have an impact on sales over the short term, right? And that's good for public health that fewer people smoke. We all know that, but it does impact this resource. So everything we look at right now, we have to look at through the lens of the current financial reality. We're going to have to rethink what the allocation looks like to the general operating support program, to the project support program. We've already decided we're not going to do another cycle of the creative culture grants that are going to bring us the AHA Festival of Lights in early August. Commercial, if you've not heard about that, you need to look at Land Studio's website and you need to go. It is going to be quite astounding, the work that they've done, and of commercial. But we have to look at everything through that light. And so as we think about how we move forward with the fellowship, we have to think not only about how we're going to do our diligence and be a responsible funder, but we also have to think about how to move forward in this context, with this financial reality in mind. But let me be really, really clear, because I'd like to get this fact out of everybody's narrative. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is facing a question right now, but the question is not whether we should fund individual artists. The question is how we should do it. Our only job is to make the community better by making grants to arts and cultural institutions. It's what we do, it's why we exist, and we understand and completely get that we don't have institutions without people, without artists, without musicians, without painters, without dancers, and in our case, since we look very broadly at arts and culture, without scientists and historians and all of those folks. We get it. We are committed to artists. We looked at some stats just for giggles as we were looking at how are we supporting artists outside the fellowship. And we were stunned to note that there are 15,000 individual artists who've gotten paid through project support grants to do projects countywide since we got started. That's in addition to the artists that are paid through operating support. That's in addition to the wonderful work that CPAC and the team has done on the Creative Workforce Fellowship. This is an important part of what we do. It will continue to be an important part of what we do. Will the Creative Workforce Fellowship look exactly like it looks right now going forward? It is too soon to say. You need to let us do our due diligence, being a responsible funder that we are, and you need to understand that we're in a slightly different financial reality. Our board's going to talk about this at our September meeting. It's September 15th at 4 o'clock at Spaces. I'm going to say that again, September 15th at 4 o'clock at Spaces. If you're not getting emails from us, sign up at cacgrants.org. We always send out emails about when meetings are going to be. We send emails out after so you can know what happened there. There's always room for public comment on the agenda. I am looking forward to hearing your comments here. We're going to take them to heart. They're going to be part of our due diligence, as they are with every program that we do, and you're also welcome to voice them at that meeting as well. With that, I'm looking forward to hearing some questions.
All right, great. So let me just ask a couple of clarifying questions here, Karen. The last point you raised, there were the 3 points you wanted. One was that this is about CAC doing its due diligence. Mm-hmm. 2, there's a financial reality. It sounds like you've got about 20 to 25% less money annually than you did at the beginning of the CAC's existence. And lastly, it's not about whether you're funding individual artists, it's how.
Right.
You then went on to say that some 15,000 artists and creative professionals have received some sort of compensation for work they've done as part of project funding. That sounds like you're teeing up the possibility of that being the way that the creative workforce receives public funding in the future.
Not teeing that up.
And I know you're not saying that, but that's what it sounded. That's what it kind of sounded like. So I want to invite you to clarify that a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think the landscape of possible outcomes is for the Creative Workforce Fellowship?
Certainly one of them is running a program like the Creative Workforce Fellowship in its next iteration, and I think Tom would probably agree that as we look at the evaluation document, it suggests some iterations, some refinements, some ways that the program itself would evolve, just like it did from the last cycle to the one we're currently in. It could look very much like that with a slightly lower level of funding for the program. And so if we were able, if that's one of the options, we're certainly able to go to Tom and say, here's the kind of money we have, what makes sense? And let them, as the professionals, help us sort out what makes sense there. We might also try to look at something that's completely different than the Creative Workforce Fellowship. There are wonderful models all over the country of how public funders fund individual artists. Tom's group has spent a lot of time thinking about them before devising this particular fellowship program. We may look at those options as well. I want to be careful about being speculative because we're not at that point even in our thinking yet. Okay. Right now, what our team is doing is the diligence of looking at where are we, what's our responsibility, what do the options look like, who do we need to talk to, what input do we need to get before we're even close to being ready to make recommendations to our board in September. You're coming at us in the middle of a process, so just know that, and that's a good time to hear input and questions. Don't assume that something is already completely done. It's not.
The recommendations in the report, none of them say stop the program. None of the recommendations seem to say anything other than this looks like a great program and there are, here's a list of how you could improve it and make it work a little better. What part of why did it make sense upon receiving the evaluation to halt what seemed like it was like a regular part of the process of just refunding or continuing the program? At what point did the evaluation and all of that say, well, we have to stop it for the moment?
I'd actually turn that around.
Okay.
And we'll see where Tom is on this as well. But we have been talking throughout the process of starting the evaluation, doing the evaluation, getting the materials, all the way through that. We have agreed together that until this evaluation is finished, we all want to be informed by it. We all want to make decisions based on what it says. And we'd done some initial thinking about where things might move forward, but we decided the smart thing and the respectful thing to do would be to wait until this was done, and then for us to do our diligence beginning then. So it's not so much a stop as it is a start on our part of saying, let's make sure we're informed by this very detailed document before we move forward.
Okay. Tom, is there any point that's been raised or question that I've asked so far that you want to kind of weigh in on?
Well, I think one of the things that is out there, which concerns me a lot, is is fear regarding this program ending. And I understand that, but I think one of the things that I hope this group will also take to heart is fear is not a prophecy of the future. It's an edifice of the mind. And we need to think about what's the future in terms of arts and cultural funding in Cuyahoga County that has led to this program even being established.
Okay. One of the possibilities might have been to sort of put the money in escrow or something like that, you know, while you're sort of pressing the pause button. That seems to be the only metaphor we can use since we can't say suspended. But
It's Free Country Day, and you can say what you want.
But I'm trying to. But CAC didn't do that. Was that an option for you, or not an option, to like sort of encumber the money and say, like, we're going to put this money aside right now for future individual artist funding? You know.
So let's get really clear about that. It's a $565,000 investment on CAC's part each year for 2 years in this last program, right? It's $565,000 in year one, $565,000 in year two. CAC also carries a reserve. It's that 10th year of funding that we have to spend out. Remember that when the issue 18 passed in 2006, and then we started collecting taxes, there was no CAC yet. It had to get built. We had to build grant programs. We had to put the word out and get the money into the community. We collected tax for that period of time, and that tax money is in the bank. The money for any individual artist program is in the bank at CAC. It's not a question of we took the money and spent it somewhere else. Okay. We didn't allocate it into our budget this year because we weren't sure what we were doing. But we were confident that as soon as we were ready to talk about what we're doing, we'd have the ability to pull those funds out of reserve, have our board make that decision, and then move forward. So I'd like to also be able to get rid of the narrative that says, oh, they spent the money on something else. No, the money is there, ready to go whenever we decide what the right thing is to do for individual artist funding in the context of being responsible and in the context of this new financial reality.
I want to ask you both about how you think the CAC board ought to make this decision, i.e., what are the most important things for the people who are going to be deciding to be thinking about the important issues? Is it about economic impact? Is it about community impact? Is it about the notion that lots of people have that individual artists ought to be able to make a living at being an artist? What is it that ought to be considered?
Well, let me tell you a little bit
about
how
that's a question actually for everybody later
sure.
as well.
And I'd love to hear what other folks would like to think about that. Our trustee, Steve Minter, is here. I'm sure he'll be eager to hear what you have to say, and we'll bring that certainly back to the conversation with our board, as will we. I think a couple of things to think about. Your point earlier about the evaluation document itself. When we look at that evaluation document, we look at it in the context, the same context we use for making all decisions. We look at CAC's mission, we look at our vision for the future, we look at our values around accountability and impartiality and transparency, all of that. And we look to see how all of our programs align with our goals and objectives for the future. That is an amazing, it is a very comprehensive document that talks about the fellowship and how it's worked. One of the things we're going to have to take into account, that document also talks a lot about celebrating excellence and validating artists. And those are not concepts that are aligned with CAC's other grant-making objectives around elevating public benefit, around artistic vibrancy, around organizational capacity, or in this case, individual capacity. There's a misalignment a little bit there with what the goals of that program are from CPAC's perspective and what our goals are. And so that's going to have to be one thing our board thinks about as we move forward. They're also going to need to think about our financial reality and context, and we're going to do this with all of our grant programs. I don't want anyone to walk out of here thinking we would eliminate a fellowship program and not touch other kinds of things. I would imagine every program at CAC is going to get a haircut in 2015, because that's how it's going to have to be when you have less money. You all manage budgets of either your own or in organizations. You understand that. So that's another piece we're going to need to look at. I know our board wants to hear input from the community, and so we'll certainly take that into account. We're certainly looking at what others do around the country. We'll take that into account as well. And frankly, we need to think about how this rounds out the grant making that we'll do for the next 2 to 3 years in the context, as Tom said, of knowing that our resource is finite and good Lord willing, it will be renewed for another 10 years, but we have to keep that in mind as well. So our board will look at this decision through all of those lenses. Staff is doing the good work right now of bringing them good data to look at, and we will bring them some recommendations in September to think about. We're just not done with that work yet, but that's how the process will work.
Tom, what do you think?
Well, our mission hasn't changed in 17 years. Our mission is to strengthen and unite and connect the arts and cultural sector. And when we say the arts and cultural sector, we're talking about arts and cultural organizations, we're talking about individual artists, and we're talking about the projects that some of our allied groups do, like community development corporations and health and human services. So my hope is that when the board has an opportunity to review this, we clearly know that because of your enabling legislation, you can't give grants to individuals. But you can give grants to not-for-profit organizations who can give grants to individuals. And that was one of the single purposes when CAC and CPAC brought our resources together. With CAC, it was money. With CPAC, it was a grant application, and we were funded. And because we were funded, then CPAC could give support to individual artists. And over that time, yes, the criteria has been focused on excellence, and yes, the criteria has been focused on the public value. And we've, in fact, increased that part of the criteria based on CAC's new mission. But it is absolutely essential in terms of CPAC's board and staff, and I would say even more the individual artists who are in this room, is that some sort of direct support to individual artists is sustained.
Can I make a comment
Yeah.
to sort of follow on with that?
Sure, of course.
Building on your point about what the evaluation document says, one of the things that struck me, Tom, actually, and I'd love to hear your comments about this, one of our trustees pointed out to me, when you read this evaluation, you come to realize that the Creative Workforce Fellowship is doing an awful lot in a very compressed time, trying to help artists with financial literacy and marketing and promotion of their work, and all of these wraparound services. And really, he felt, and I felt when I read it again last night, some of what the evaluation suggests, it almost suggests a whole new direction for CPAC itself as an agency, taking on not just a fellowship, but a creative artist initiative that includes lots and lots of different things. Has there been talk at CPAC about that?
Do you mean like in the way that CPAC took on the artists as entrepreneurs?
Right.
Yeah.
Like all of the wraparound services could be a full-time agenda for an organization just in and of themselves. And I know that your team has had a lot of work to pull off this fellowship, and I know they've talked about the workload. I wonder if that's something that CPAC has considered. Is there more in the individual artist area that you folks want to take on? Because it is such important work, and I think the fellowship has helped us see the need in a way maybe we didn't see it before.
Before we had the Individual Artist Fellowship, we had the Artist as Entrepreneur Institute, and that came from the individual artist community saying, we need some sort of opportunity to improve our business practices. And so the Artist as Entrepreneur Institute was formed. Go forward in terms of 2004, a lot of artists did not have health insurance, and probably a lot of artists today don't have health insurance. But we saw an opportunity to partner with the Council of Smaller Enterprises, which at that time had 16,000 members, which meant they could buy insurance at pretty good rates. We were able to get a grant, national grant, so we were bringing money into Cleveland to test the Cozy Arts Network. And that worked for about 6 years. With the change in health insurance practices, they saw a drop-off in terms of artists who were interested in the program. I'm glad that you're a board member and you are concerned about CPAC's mission. I can tell you that my board and my staff focus on that every day. And it is our intention to do the very best job we can do every day, knowing that every day is different. So I think you're a little off here in terms of CPAC's ability to do these types of programs, because we have done more than just one program.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when it comes
Yeah.
to the management of the organization, the workload, believe me, my staff will tell me to my face, right, staff, if things aren't are too much for them. But I'm fortunate having a wonderful staff who understands why it's important to have individual artists in this community, in fact, any community, but in this community in particular, be recipients of public sector funding, which they help to get passed.
That's true.
Okay. Let's bring in your comments and questions. Just raise your hand. Spencer over here has the microphone, so he's the guy whose attention you want to grab.
Just a comment and then a possible suggestion. My name is Dave Burkholz. I was the executive director of the George Gott Foundation when CPAC was organized and was involved in helping to hire Tom, which is probably one of the best things I've ever done. And then I went on to become one of the first three members, along with Steve Minter, of CAC, and I chaired the task force on individual artist programs. So my involvement is past history, but it's deep. And my passion for having a program for individual artists goes back to my earliest days in this town. So I think this business of direct support for artists is vitally important. It doesn't compare to an artist being hired in a project or an artist having a job with one of the supported organizations. That's a different kettle of fish. I'm for that too, but the individual artist program, these grants have been life-changing for a lot of people, and I think that's what this was about, and we are admired by many communities across the country for taking on this challenge and this risk. It's got all of those components. So I personally am deeply committed to that notion, and I hope you'll all find a way to make this happen. The second thing, when we started CPAC and we began to move towards having this possible success in raising public money, what concerned me was what was going to happen to the foundation community and the private sector. So if we raised all this money, were all of us going to run for the hills and put our money someplace else rather than into the arts programming in this community? I would say that happened a little bit, but not to a significant degree as I thought. But what I raised in our conversations about creating the fellowship program was saying to myself and to my peers in the foundation community, this was an opportunity for us to step up and also support this innovative program for individuals, which clearly would be the most difficult piece of the public support argument. I would make that argument again. I would make that argument that the Guns and the Clevelands and the others in the private sector ought to be called upon now, not to make up maybe all the difference, but a significant part of the difference so that this program stays intact. We talk about public-private partnership in this town. Who the hell could have a better one than all the money the public's generating and a relatively small amount of foundation money to keep it whole? So my suggestion would be, don't ignore that. I would be pursuing that as actively as possible.
Thank you, sir. I know other folks have comments.
Okay, I'm Mark Krieger. I'm a painter. I have a studio over at the 78th Street Studios. You say you're looking around the country at other models. I had a couple questions. I'm not without committing to any, and do you have a short list of the things you're looking at and the kinds of, how they're different from what we do? And also, are any people looking at us? Because it seems to me that what you have done is a little innovative, as far as supporting artists, and I wonder if that has had any interest for other cities, you know, like not the New Yorks and Chicagos and LAs of the world, but the Minneapolises, the St. Louises, the Clevelands, the Pittsburghs, that sort of thing, that are our kind of scale. And I also second the idea about the Gun Foundation chipping in.
He also mentioned the Cleveland Foundation, too.
Right. Gun Foundation's having a meeting right now, so they can't be here to defend themselves. But yeah, I'm going to answer the second part of your question first, Mark, and I'm sure Tom will want to chime in as well. There are lots of people looking at Cleveland. There are lots of people looking at Cleveland. St. Louis's model is built almost exactly on the model that CPAC put together, and that's come together in the last couple of years. What's unusual about Cleveland's model is that it's using public dollars and the amount of the fellowship. $20,000 is a lot of money in this world. There are a lot of places who will do $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 grants, or $10,000 or $15,000 grants. There are a lot of places who will fund something like this with private money. But the combination of public money and a sizable fellowship certainly has brought folks looking at us from cities large and small, not just cities of comparable size, but bigger cities as well. So sure, there's lots of people looking at us. We're also just looking to see who's doing what, based on what I just said. Who's using public money to do this? Which public funders use private money to do this? What are the dollar amounts people are looking at? What are the restrictions people are looking at? We're just trying to take a test of the landscape. And I don't have a specific suggestion for you about we're looking at this one versus that one. We're just, we're in the environmental scan phase, if you know that geeky phrase, to just get a sense of what's the landscape. CPAC certainly, and the committee did that in 2007 and 2008. It's probably time to just refresh that look and understand what's going on today.
In terms of 2007 and 2008, when we did the task force, one of the things that two of the things that were forthcoming when it came to the fellowship. One was there were a number of people who felt like, well, let's do $2,500 grants, $5,000 grants in terms of fellowships. On the other end of the spectrum were people who said, Cuyahoga County has done something very, very important when it comes to public sector funding for the arts, and at that time was generating about $18 million, $19 million on average, and it has gone down to $15 million. But even as it has gone down to $15 million, it's still one of the largest public sector funders of the arts in the United States. Where we came down on $20,000 was, do we do something symbolic for artists, or do we do something substantive? And Dave and the board came back and said, we like this model. We're going to give you a grant to go ahead. So we still believe that a substantive grant to individual artists, a substantive fellowship that helps with research and development and the ability to buy equipment and the ability to hire people to work with you on your projects, thus creating jobs, is important. And it is something that we're committed to. And $20,000 I don't think is that much money, to tell you the truth. But that's my opinion.
Can I see a quick show of hands of any fellows in the room? So that's one, okay, about a dozen or so. Great, thank you.
And can I ask a similar one?
Yeah.
Anybody here who applied for a fellowship but didn't get one?
Okay.
Okay.
Now, can I ask a question?
Yes. No.
Anybody that didn't apply for one, do you think the process was fair or unfair?
Who did apply?
Who applied but
Who
didn't get
did
it?
applied and didn't get one? Do you think the process was fair or unfair?
That was very fair.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir, in the back.
My name is R.A. Washington, and I'm a fellow for this year. I have a couple of points and a question. Has it been considered, or do you think it will be considered, to maybe stop giving operational support to large endowment organizations? sort of like the Cleveland Museum of Art, or organizations that have a huge endowment, getting millions of dollars of public money for operation support. You think that can be considered as a source for this lack that has been highlighted? The other thing is that with my fellowship, I run Guide to Culture, which is a bookstore co-op and print shop on the west side in Detroit Shoreway. We send out 350 individual books per week to books to prisoners all over the state of Ohio. We have 7,500 pen pals. We sell 30 books a month to the general public. If you can do the math of media mail, and we've been doing this for the whole time that we've been open. The other thing is we have a co-op membership program where we sell books for $1. Any kid that lives in Detroit Shoreway who can show us proof of residence can take a book for free. These kinds of programs for individual artists need to be sustained at that level, and more importantly, maybe at a higher level. Part of the problem is transparency. There was no misinformation that was given. There was no information. So when people responded on public and social media, they were upset because of the lack of information. We are a very savvy bunch. You know, in my estimate, we don't really need the business development part. We do fine on that on our own. What we need is a living wage. And the final thing is when you consider the impact of art on how many people can benefit from a particular grant, when you look at it from that point of view, you're looking at something that is subjective and not very quantifiable with a business model. With a business model that has proven to be top-heavy, with a business model, a capitalist model that has been proven to be unsustainable, that eats its young, that takes resources from places that they need resources. So the concept of there being a little bit less money because people are stopping smoking, well, poor people still smoke. Poor people smoke. They will always smoke, and they will always drink. So when you take individual artist programs from the individual artists, when you threaten those programs, you're hurting the very people that are funding these large organizations. And sometimes people feel disenfranchised from going to these large endowed organizations in the first place. But they don't feel disenfranchised coming to see me read a poem to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I address this question
Yeah.
about operating support?
Sure.
And Mr. Washington, I didn't know the work that you do with prisoners and the work that you're doing in the neighborhood in the co-op sort of sense. I appreciate hearing about that, and you're to be commended for what you're doing. That's really quite awesome. So thank you for sharing that with us. I just want to address the first part of your statement about what's going to happen with the large organizations receiving operating support. And just remind you of two things. One, the statement I made earlier. This is not about whether we are going to fund individual artists. It's about how we will fund individual artists. We need to figure out the right way to do that that's responsible in our current fiscal climate. And two, there was a comment earlier about everybody's going to get a haircut. Everybody's going to get a haircut. We're going to need to look at the allocation for operating support and the allocation for project support and everything that we do. So it is not that the individual artist community is being singled out here. We're going to have to be responsible and look at everything, but we certainly take your comments to heart.
It's the smallest chunk of money.
It's one of the smaller chunks of money. It's not
So
just the smallest,
that money
right?
should be sustained at the level or higher.
Yeah, we hear you.
Period.
We hear you.
Are there any other?
Can we do one
Yeah.
person at a time with the microphone? Because then we can get it all on the recording. It's just a logistical thing.
Apologies.
No problem. It's okay. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Raymond. In full disclosure, I'm a fellow, but I'm really here as the director of Cleveland Public Theater. We have a huge vested interest in the individual artist fellowships. I think it is a national model. When I travel the world, no one is talking about the incredible public support for project support. The only thing people, and I'm not saying project support is bad, but the only thing everyone's talking about is, wow, you're getting public funding and it's operating support and individual artist support. Because those are the two things that are, in my mind, most lacking in the rest of the funding field. And I'm just talking about balance. I'm not talking about good or bad for any of those. I walked in because I'm incredibly supportive of the work you've done, Karen, and Tom has been a great mentor to me and an incredible asset in our community. So I walked in here with very little fear. I walked in thinking, oh, everything's going to work out. And honestly, a little bit of fear has started creeping in here. And I'll just tell you a couple of things, and maybe you could respond and at least get me back to where I was when I walked in. Okay, so the first thing is, as you're talking about the haircut, I know you're working with Helicon, and I would like to know if you're going to be.
What is that?
Helicon is thank you for asking, is an arts consulting and research firm. I'm wondering if you're going to be using their study and helping Clevelanders understand the study they did by perhaps you doing an editorial in the Plain Dealer about how there's been disproportionate funding across the United States for very large organizations. And I really, really would stress that we're all hoping that when we're going and knocking on doors for the renewal, that we will see at least as much of a quotient of funding going to individual artists and to smaller organizations. I really would stress that. And again, I think you can play a leadership role by talking about that study and promoting that study. So, but I'm afraid when you talk about a haircut, because I get worried because who are the people that are interacting with you and your board the most? I don't know if it's the people in this room. I just don't know. And I know that you've made a big effort to try to reach out, so I acknowledge that. But it's scary because I don't know who's in the room. The second thing is this. So you have three big programs: operating support, project support, individual artist support. None of those, although all of them have been analyzed, none of those have been, whatever word you're using, but I'm going to say, stopped for a period of time to look at research. Even if there's, so it makes me worried because then what does that mean? But it makes me more worried because of the message it sends to the community, because this election is not going to be won by money. It's going to be won by the people in this room and our friends and the smaller organizations who have credibility. I think, you know, we have several people at this table who are ready to walk Lakeview Terrace, Riverside, Woodhill, all of these estates to get people out to the polls and voting for this issue. We have the credibility to do it because we've been there. So when a message like this, which you're not intending to send, but to me there is an implicit message when one of the three major programs has a pause. Can you explain why there wasn't a pause in the other programs? Right. And how do we go out there and help the rest of the artists out in the community not have that fear and feel disenfranchised, because we need them or we won't win?
Of course. I will do my best to allay your fear, because I would like you to leave without fear. I would like you to leave with facts. Facts are your friends. Facts are not scary, right? The project support program was paused. You might remember we did a round of project support in 2008, and then we stopped to rethink it in 2009 and brought it back in 2010. So this isn't the first time that we've done, hey, wait a minute, let's recalibrate based on information. So it's important to know that it's definitely something that we've done before as an institution. Raymond mentioned the work with the Helicon Collaborative. That's Holly Sidford, who's in the news today if you read Arts News, Nick Rabkin from Chicago, and they've been doing some work and some listening with us as we've, in our project support and operating support grant programs, worked to help organizations define the way they're benefiting the community using public money. We know that that's really hard work for some organizations, probably not for CPT, but for some others, it's hard to talk about that which you intrinsically know. You know art makes people's lives better, but it's hard to talk about how you're actually doing that on the ground. And so we brought Holly and Nick in to do some focus grouping and some listening and to help us think about how we, as a funder, can do a better job of supporting organizations who are thinking about how their work benefits the public. And their study's not done yet, and when it is, we will get it shared with everybody. And their study, I think, doesn't quite make the point that there's this disproportionate between bigger, older, endowed institutions and on-the-ground institutions. But I think they do make the point that they play different roles in the community and that we need everybody. We don't just need the large ones. We need to make sure that we have a cultural ecosystem. And if you've listened to CAC's words over the last 4.5 years, you've heard us say this a lot. The cultural ecosystem includes organizations of all sizes doing work on the ground. Some of those big legacy institutions can't do the work that Cleveland Public Theater can do. They can't do the work that Mr. Washington is talking about. And we need them all. Yes, those organizations get large dollars, but we make more grants to smaller organizations, right? And so we try to find a way to make it fair and impartial so that there's something meaningful going to folks at all slices here. And to your other point, Raymond, it's really important that I hear everybody's voices, and that our board hears everybody's voices, not just the loudest, but everybody's voices. It's why we encourage people to come to our board meetings all the time. People always come to our board meetings, and they don't often make comment, but they're always welcome to, because we need you to know that this is your money. We're not doing anything in the dark. We're doing everything as transparently as we can, and we need to hear from you as well. Remember, our constituents are not just the organizations that we fund. The constituents of a public funder are the residents of the community that they serve. So we got to hear from everybody. That's really, really meaningful. And we will continue to hear from everybody. And so all of that will get wrapped into the work. We are not going to make any decisions in a vacuum. And I think you raised some important points that we're going to take to heart.
How's your fear? Higher, lower?
I'm still worried about public perception.
Yeah.
Even the people who don't have the facts, it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And I think getting that message out to the people who are going to be making that case in the community.
Right.
But
And
so
so
much
please
we
help
can do.
us. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Who's next?
Hello. Hi, I'm Christy Ebert. I'm a fellow this year. Sorry, I'm going to clear my throat. I wrote down my thoughts a little bit, so I'm not just rambling. But I first want to thank you for your diligence in creating such an innovative program. So thank you so much. You had mentioned that when you fund larger organizations, they also fund individual artists. And that's true. And as a fellow, I'll probably fund about 15 to 20 other creative folks to help me out. I'm not going to give them all my grant, but I'm still helping them out a little bit. The difference is, though, is that the individual can choose their creative process, and rather than committing to other people's visions, which is great too. I mean, you got to collaborate with people. And as an artist, I'm sure anyone can agree that stuff is really expensive. So even like a light can be $5,000, and I can go on and on about how expensive music equipment is, but I won't, so no worries. But my question, you had said that after the review process, they had said that maybe CPAC should do more, but that sounds like something that would require even more funding so that they could have larger staff, and then just able to distribute the funds. So I really want to let you know that I think it's really important, this program, and what CPAC does, and I thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Sure.
Got one in the back there behind you, Spencer.
Hey, thanks. I'm Sean Watterson. Full disclosure, I just joined the CPAC board yesterday, so not
And thanks
fully bought in.
Thanks for the hot dogs.
Yes. I have two timing questions. You had talked about the due diligence, and that's part of the reason for the pause on the Workforce Fellowship Program. If a decision is made to do something different, what kind of timing are you looking at? Because if it's a new program, if you need to take the 6 months to do the due diligence on an existing program with a report that's been issued, what kind of timing is reasonable for people in the room to expect before an individual artist funding program would replace it or come in its place? And then the second is sort of related to the public perception issue. The vote is going to have to happen at some point. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to go on the ballot. Will the decision on how to fund individual artists be made and publicized before you would go out to get a renewal on this on the cigarette tax?
Sean, thanks. Those are two great clarifying questions, so thank you for asking them. The CAC hat coming off, campaign hat going on. The early stage thinking about when a campaign would happen, and there are community leaders doing this work. This is not me. There's a group of community leaders coming together to begin to talk about this. The ideal timing that we'd like to see is November of 2015. It may be May of 2016. As you probably know, County Council makes the ultimate decision about when these things get on the ballot, and so there's going to have to be some conversation about that. But assume we're managing from November of 2015 is when the vote goes forward. I would imagine, and this is speculative, so we have to be a little bit careful here, we'll have a conversation in September with our board where we talk about here's the data we've collected, here's the diligence we've done, here's some ways forward, which direction are we going, that we would move from there to whatever the next steps look like, being able to roll something out, I would imagine, in the first half of 2015, so that there's no reason we shouldn't be able to have a program on the ground at some point ready to go before a November of 2015 election. I think it's important to manage to that. I think it's important to have something for folks to work with. We need to be able to tell the public that this is all of the work that public funding helps support. I can't imagine we wouldn't be ready by then, but we're in the speculative space now, so we have to be careful with, I don't want to sit here and promise you that it will be done, but I can't imagine that we wouldn't be ready by then.
A question related to that, I'm just going to jump in your September board meeting with respect to the Creative Workforce Fellowship Program, will there be a decision being made?
There's going to be no decision on up or down for the Creative Workforce Fellowship. That's not what the conversation is. The conversation is what is our responsibility around individual artist funding and what's the best way for us to do that moving forward. It's a conversation based on how we're going to fund individual artists, not whether we're going to fund them. It is also not a conversation that says yes or no, should we do the Creative Workforce Fellowship as it currently exists. It's higher plane than that.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Faye Hargate. I'm a fellow as well and education associate at Cleveland Public Theater. Just so you know more about me, and I know you know this, Karen, but I am program director of Brick City Theater, which serves around 450 individual youth every year that live in public housing that are 5 to 14 years old, creatively engaging those youth. So my question, it came up twice. How your core values or your missions between CPAC and CAC in regards to artistic excellence and public value, how those didn't align. You sort of alluded to that, but didn't really expand upon that. So I don't get that. Can you explain, please?
So as you look at how CPT participates in the General Operating Support Program, right? And you know what our criteria is in that program. Our criteria are the same in the Project Support Program. You'll notice that nowhere in there do we talk about artistic excellence. No place. And it's not because we don't value excellent art. That's not it. But what we like to talk about is how art in whatever form, and we also say arts and culture, because remember, we're also talking about nature and science and all kinds of other things that fit under that rubric. How we're working to keep that stuff vital and vibrant, but we're not necessarily talking only about excellence. We think vibrancy is a bigger, broader term than just excellence, and so we try to frame all of our work through that slightly broader lens.
So vibrancy includes crappy art?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
I'm just trying.
I hope not.
Trying to lighten the mood a little bit here.
Lighten the mood a little bit, but if you're measuring excellence, you probably wouldn't look at popsicle stick art being done by folks doing art therapy that is truly transformational, right?
Okay.
So we got to keep room for that in our programs. Now, I'm not saying that art therapy is about popsicle stick art. Don't like all of a sudden now I'm tarred and feathered for art therapy. That's not what I mean. But we need.
I'm sorry, but when you does,
Right.
what a number of us do. You know, we're making popsicle art, and we are also professionally
Yes.
putting our professional artistic.
No, I think she's agreeing with you.
I'm agreeing with you.
She's agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But I think both of those are excellent.
Right.
And they're, you know, indications of excellence
Right.
in that art form.
But it's not, we're not simply looking at, does it get an A+? We're looking at all the wraparound stuff that you're describing, Faye. We're looking at what does this art do? How does this empower people? We're looking at that stuff. And that's just slightly different than the frame that the fellowship is taking. There's nothing wrong with
does
that.
that mean-
It's just different.
Does that mean that there's a potential solution here lies in realigning the Creative Workforce Fellowship goals towards vibrancy and not using the word, not focusing on excellence? Is that a possibility?
I think that's also going to be a question for CPAC about how they want to take the program
Well,
forward.
both terms are subjective. Vibrancy and artistic quality. And based on CPAC's mission, we think that if you fund excellence, and excellence is not based on one art form or one iteration of an art form. It's based on what the arts and cultural organizations and the artists do. And part of that, at least from my thinking, and when I ran a state arts agency for 10 years, it was artistic excellence, but it wasn't artistic excellence based on, and anybody that plays in the orchestra out there, don't take this personally, it's not based on classical music, it's based on the type of panels that you put together to adjudicate those grant applications. And CPAC tries very hard to have panels when it comes to the fellowship that are, give me a term that means diverse, and I think we'll have hit on it. Mm-hmm. So I guess from my point of view, I would much rather focus in, and I think you're talking about project grants at this point, or something similar to that. My focus would be artistic excellence, community impact, because there are so many different communities in Cuyahoga County and so many different arts organizations that serve those communities. And then finally, the management of the organization. And so if I have to choose between artistic and vibrancy, I'm going to go with artistic.
I'm just confused. I mean, like,
Yeah.
this feels from somebody who is not, I mean, I guess the City Club is a cultural institution, but I'm not really, don't think of myself as part of the arts community in the way that Raymond is, or other people are, or the fellows are, or the way you guys are. But it sounds like we're arguing about semantics a little bit. And if the goal is to get direct funding into the hands of creative members of the creative workforce who are huge assets to the community in a lot of different ways, mm-hmm. then does it matter whether they're funded for artistic excellence or for being part of or for contributing to vibrancy?
What's vibrancy? I mean, help me with vibrancy here.
It doesn't. The point is that, like, you
Right.
come up with whatever definition makes sense for the mission of both organizations, so that everybody can feel comfortable, and then you save the program. I mean, if that's a possibility, I don't know. I mean, this is.
Well,
I'm
you're right.
always like
we're getting
meddling
involved
where I
in
shouldn't.
semantics.
Never mind.
I mean, you're absolutely right. We're getting involved in semantics, and I apologize for going off on the artistic bent, but that's who I am. I absolutely think that when it comes to public sector funding, having done that for 10 years, you have to be very, very concerned about the return to the public. It's called public sector funding. And to that end, I share Karen's concerns about that, because I had to worry about that every day for 10 years in the state of Indiana, where the state legislature is not conservative and liberal, it's conservative and cheap. So I absolutely support Karen's position when it comes to the importance of return on investment. I think return on investment is artistic quality, it is vibrancy, it is community impact, and it is the way you manage, for an arts organization that receives this, the way you manage those dollars. And to that end, certainly the project support grant and the operating support grant are concerned about those issues. But I'm an arts organization.
Mm-hmm. Receiving operating support.
So I'm focused on the arts.
Right, right. And I think, Dan, I think the point you made earlier, though, is exactly the right one, so that we don't get bogged down in the semantics. The point here is that the goals of the funder and the goals of the organization managing the program need to be aligned. And to me, there were some places in that evaluation document where I could see that we weren't necessarily aligned, and so we'd have to figure that out. That's all. That's pretty simple. You're right. There should be a way to sort that out in the context of how much money we're going to have to work with and how do we do this responsibly.
We've been doing this now for an hour and 10 minutes. I could do this all day, but I understand that not everybody can. We also have an event here at 5:30, so we know that it's going to end before that. But I'm thinking maybe another 10 more minutes, because then I'm sure a lot of you are going to want to stick around and talk to others, but just so you know what to expect. If you're done, if you're like, I've had it up to here with this, if you're full, you're welcome to leave. You're not going to offend anybody. Okay.
Actually, I have two questions. One, in what ways are you not aligned?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's question number one.
That's question number one. I can tell you the second question.
Okay.
Second question. I wanted to piggyback on Mark's question. I understand that you don't want to say what models you feel best about, but I'm assuming that you don't have an infinite number of models that you're looking at, and I'm wondering if you could tell us about some of the models that you're looking at.
Okay, sure. So let's start with the second one first. We're looking at cities like us around the country. There are about 60 of them that have local arts agencies that are sort of similarly sized places, some a little bigger, some a little smaller, just trying to use that as a set and say, okay, what's going on in cities across America where we are finding ways to support individual artists? And who's doing it with public money, who's doing it with private money passing through a public institution, not unlike what Mr. Burkholz said earlier, like is there a public-private partnership? Looking at those kind of things. And so we look at big cities like DC and Boston and New York and Chicago and LA. We look at smaller cities that look like us, like Milwaukee and Pittsburgh and those kind of places. And we just look to see what's going on and how's that working. We have a researcher working with us right now, and she's not done yet. So we're going to see what she comes back with as she looks at comparative cities around the country, just to get a sense of who's doing what. There's some great models out there. Tom could probably tell you 20 of them off the top of his head, like the Springboard model in Minnesota that I know you're really familiar with. There's lots of others, and we'll just look. Remember, it doesn't mean that we're saying we're going to stop doing this exactly as it is right now, but we want to make sure we understand the landscape 5 years on from the last time we did this kind of research. So that's the other thing. You asked where we're not aligned. Remember that this evaluation that CPAC did that is so comprehensive and certainly calls out the good work that CPAC and its staff have done to manage this program. This is their evaluation. They were evaluating their work on their goals and objectives. It wasn't something that we asked them to do. We're really glad that they did it, and we're certainly going to use it as part of our comments moving forward and our thinking moving forward. But they were doing it based on their own goals, objectives, the stuff of their own program. So that's important to know that, just that we didn't ask them to do a study and then come back and say, well, we're not so sure. That's just not how this worked. We want to make sure that we're aligned around the way the program runs, that the program is aligned with our values around fairness and impartiality and all of those things, which certainly it is. And we're going to test that question of validation for artists as well. We know that that's a big finding of the study, and that's something that we just need to think about as an institution. But all of that work is going on now. And Tom, I know you have a comment.
Well, just to get to the evaluation, yes, CPAC, it is evaluation that CPAC went out and said, here's the program, here are the goals of the program. We'd like an independent evaluator to analyze that. And so we went through the process of reviewing RFPs, and we found what we thought was a good group of evaluators, and they did it. Also remember that one of CPAC's core competencies is research. And we do a lot of research when it comes to the intersection of arts and culture and individual artists and other sectors. So this research is something that isn't unusual for us to do, and because we were at midterm, 5 years into the program, we absolutely felt it was necessary to go forward with that. And we also wanted to share it with our funders, because I think funders want to know from a third party how an event or a project is going. So I just want to make a clarification. Public policy, research, and capacity building. That's our core competencies.
Did you? But what about the alignment issue? Like, can you guys talk about that a little bit more?
We do different things, right? This is a wonderful private nonprofit that was started long before I got here. I wouldn't have a job without Tom, right? I wouldn't be here without the work that CPAC did and you all did to make this all happen. And you have your work and your competencies and your mission, and you serve it every day extraordinarily well. And we're the public funder, and we have we're a different structure and a different setup and a different mission. So right there, we're different institutions. I think the thing we're all aligned about is public funding for the arts in this community is working, and we need to keep it. I think there is absolutely no dissension among the two of us about that. That's the goal. We got to do that. That has to happen. How those dollars are distributed becomes the work of CAC, its staff, and its board. And we have to think about how that works in alignment with our mission and our vision and all of those kind of things. We're just different. We look at the world in different ways. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is, right?
Okay. Any more?
Just what?
Quickly, because you've already spoken. I want to. There are two other people who haven't spoken yet.
Well, they should go next.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Who's up front here?
Full disclosure, Megan Van Voris is Chief Operating Officer for CPAC and rarely agrees with me. Megan.
Rarely? Okay. Well, it's just one comment, really, and it's something to think about when we're thinking about the question we should be asking as it relates to the cultural ecosystem and individual artists and their contribution to it. And I do think it's really important for people to understand that when we did this evaluation, it was the first time that we had to actually, from all of the cycles of funding that we did, to really pull together what the impact of all of the people that we were funding was. And it provides a definition and a framework for looking at what artists actually, their unique contributions to this cultural ecosystem are. And it ranges from so many different things to theater artists and playwrights who we know are actually telling the story of our time in this place, to painters, to sculptors that are also telling that story, to other people who are who are just creating music that is really particularly important. So it runs, and then there's other people like R.A. and Talise and Michaela and Mackenzie Clark who are doing work that are looking at specific communities, like people who are struggling from issues of rape and trying to come to terms with that, and all of these broader issues that the community faces. And so one of the things I think it's really important for all of us to consider is what is the unique contribution, particularly that this evaluation evidences of the artists in our community. And the idea or the thinking that, to Faye's point, the concept of community impact and artistic excellence are not at odds with one another. No. And in fact, what we find in this community is that those things are very powerful together. And we see that across the board, particularly from the artists that we fund. And I just want to say that because I am so proud of all of the people that we funded through these dollars.
Couldn't agree with you more.
We're going to do two more, and then we'll pause.
Hi, I'm Deborah Silver, and I'm an artist. I just wanted to say I don't really see any misalignment here. I mean, we've had plenty of studies showing that supporting a vibrant and thriving arts community is good for everyone, so I don't really see where the misalignment is. And also, I don't want to be comparable to other cities. I want to be better. And this $20,000, you're right, it is meaningful. It means something when you get that kind of money, that it's career changing, it is life altering, and I don't want to see it changed. And you know what? It's less than 5% of the budget. Cut something else.
Oh, just quickly, George Brand, I'm also a fellow this year. And just wanted to share, I've done a lot of travel this year, and there's been talk of other cities. And really, wherever I've gone, people have been very surprised and kind of shocked, actually, by the size of this fellowship, whether it's in California, New York. I mean, cities that are much larger than ours. are stunned to hear this and kind of think I'm joking at first. That's usually a long conversation, which I convince that I'm not. So I, as you say, I mean, I think we're doing actually better than a lot of cities around the country. And I know personally when I moved here a few years ago, knowing that this is public funding, it makes an artist feel very welcome. Knowing that, and even before I got this, just knowing it existed and that the public felt this strongly about having a strong, excellent artistic community in its vicinity, just it does make the artist feel very welcome. So I just want to throw that out there.
That's why I'm here too. That's why I came here, because that is such a powerful statement when there's public funding for the arts the way there is here. Yeah.
One final question or comment from Mr. Clark. Final.
Do not try to take the microphone away from Spencer.
He's very strong.
So I'm, in the spirit of disclosure, Richard Clark. I'm with the John P. Murphy Foundation and the Coolest Foundation, two private charitable foundations. They are separate organizations, but in the aggregate represent the third largest funder of the arts in Cleveland after Gund in Cleveland. And Coolest has been around since '37, Murphy since '60, both founded by capitalists who put the bulk of their estates into trust, and we shouldered the load for funding of the arts for decades, nearly 100 years before there was public funding. But I actually want to speak for a minute as a taxpayer in Cuyahoga County who voted for the original levy.
Are you a smoker?
I'm not going to tell you here. I'm not moving to Colorado anytime soon. So here's my thing. And years, you know, I've got a lot of friends who are artists. I'm very supportive of on a personal level, of the art community in Cleveland. And so I'm sympathetic to you, but as a taxpayer, I also want them to hit the pause button if there's a question about the efficacy of any program. You know, I voted for the levy, the original levy, and I couldn't believe how long it took them to give away some money. And there was this I didn't even know what adjudication was until I met Schorgl. And if you've ever been to an adjudication for project funding or general operating support, it's a very arduous process. All I'm trying to say is I want the artists individual artists to be funded, absolutely. I also want to make sure that the money that we're paying into this program is well taken care of. And you got to figure out the balance between the two. I don't have any fear about studies or buttons or process, but I do have a concern about people sort of fighting this out in public. I think that's the thing that will be the greatest disservice to getting the levy renewed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. We're going to wrap.
Okay.
Do either of you have any final things you feel need to be said?
Other than I'm going to stand out there as long as anybody else has questions that these wanted to ask but didn't get asked here, I'll stay till your questions are done. So.
Okay.
Community Partnership for Arts and Culture, CPAC, is going to continue to go forward with its mission, and that mission includes every artist and every taxpayer, whether you're a smoker or not, in this room. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, on your tables you will see also just a small advertisement about an event that's coming up in September that you may be interested in with Jamie Bennett of the National Endowment for the Arts. You are part of the arts community. It may interest you. We would be delighted to see you. That aside, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming today. This, you know, we kind of offered to convene this meeting because it seemed like there was a lot of heat and not enough light, and we wanted to shed a little bit more light on what's happening. It's very, very meaningful to me personally that all of you showed up. It's a privilege for the City Club to be in this position, to be able to be a kind of a neutral third-party convener for this sort of really important dialogue. So I appreciate it. I thank you all for coming. Tom and Karen, I thank you very much for your time. I know it's no fun being in the hot seat, but that's, you know, heavy is the crown, or however that goes. Yeah, anyway, it was the hat. It was the hat.
was
The
the
two
hat.
hats you
Okay,
were
got it.
switching on and off. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, and come back anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.